In order to understand the corporate leanings ingrained within the Democratic Party structure, it is necessary to look at the corporatist revolution's roots. The rapid transformation of the Democratic Party throughout the 80s and 90s, and subsequently through the past 30 years, where the party's deep dive into fiscal conservatism was matched with a socially liberal facade. Once Carter was sunk and Reagan took the White House, the Democrat Party scrambled to gain a foothold in the political economy. With radical leftist groups from the 70s out of the way, and labor unions effectively dismantled by both Carter and the Reagan administrations, what better way to achieve this goal than to turn to the moneyed interests, like those which helped prop up the Republican Party in the White House, and to bend to the will of the Republican establishment to make sure that they can rebuild their alliance with the corporate interests, and also the moderate conservative voters in the meantime. This thinking prepared the Democratic Party for the great pivot in the 1992 election, where the party would cement its fate as a centrist-leaning party of the elite, ostensibly to this day. The creeping normalcy of the transition of the Democrat Party slowly but surely normalized voters to the idea of some Democrats using rhetoric that leaned to the right of their base. Not even a month after Reagan's inauguration, the moneyed interest whose eyes were on the DNC went straight to work to rebuild the party and prepare for the inevitable power shift to come. In an effort to counter the Republican wave, corporate Democrats saw an opportunity. Enter the Democratic Leadership Council, founded in 1985 by Wall Street's favorite Democrat, Al Fromm. Their goal was to strengthen their business relations by appealing to special interests. Essentially, their plan to rebuild the party was to rent-seek within the financial sector, and they did so by fielding candidates from the circles of wealthy political and social figures. Conservative Democrats who were aligned with their corporate agenda to distance the party further and further away from leftist, labor, and civil rights movements. With up-and-coming names like Bruce Babbitt, Al Gore, and Bill Clinton, the Democrat Leadership Council set off with the fresh faces of the New Democrats, leaving leftists and working-class people in the dust. With Al Gore as a running mate and the DLC propping up their candidacy with the help of expansive media coverage and lucrative support from the private sector, the New Democrats were set to prove themselves to their corporate donors. In a blowout victory in 1992, the DLC duo took the White House, calling for an end to Republican trickle-down economics. A new era dawned on Democrats, a promise of democratic change to our economy as a whole, and about-face to the established status quo laid out by the Reagan-era Republicans, and most importantly, New Democrats. With an electorate populated with the fresh-faced Gen Xers and landscape amnesia, and with people vying for a change in the White House after years of Republican rule, by any means necessary, even the labor sector, previously scorned by the Carter administration, were willing to forget how things once were before and throughout the DLC coup of the Democrat Party. However, those hoping for the best, those hoping for progressive change, were in for a slew of unexpected deregulation of key industries and an expansion of free trade, setting the stage for the Great Recession of 2008. Why on earth would the Democrats be preaching about deregulation and veiled nods to austerity measures? One word: triangulation. Triangulation is a strategy used by these Democrats to court voters from other sides of the political spectrum by meeting them in the center, instead of sticking to core values of their party. The problem was, at this point, as a result of creeping normalcy and the corporate coup, these were now the values of the DNC party. We can see this in the incremental right-leaning concessions made to the DNC platform from 1996 in an effort to appeal to conservative voters. Quote, "We need a smaller government, and we must have a larger national spirit." Lauding over their minimization of government, quote, "President Clinton, working with the National Performance Review chaired by Vice President Gore, has cut federal government by almost 240,000 positions, making the smallest federal government in 30 years. We find the same pattern yet again in the 2000 DNC platform. Quote, "Under Bill Clinton's leadership, the federal workforce has been cut by 377,000, making the smallest government since Dwight D. Eisenhower was president. 16,000 pages of regulations were scrapped. As a percentage of the workforce, the federal government is the smallest it has been since the New Deal." So, not only did these New Democrats talk the talk, But they walked the walk when it came to their neoliberal free market values, deregulating Wall Street by repealing FDR's Glass-Steagall, deregulating the telecommunications industry in 1996, and pumping up the private prison industry while enacting horrific welfare reform and supporting the expansion of federally funded charter schools, just to name a few. The DNC's move to the center-right soon became an immediate threat to the Republicans' voter blocs. We can look at the extremely close margin of the 2000 presidential election once the Republicans wised up from their 1996 failure and began to distance themselves away from the New Democrats, further and further to the right, in order to maintain a viable voter pool. Yet, despite all of this, the Democrats could not stop triangulating. Even after Obama's 2008 campaign of progressive hope and change, the DNC continued to abandon the progressive core despite Obama's rhetoric, until it hit a brick wall in the 2016 election cycle. Now, the Democratic Party has a question it needs to ask itself. Do you pull a 180 and cater to the demands and ideologies of the values of your progressive base yet again? Or do you continue to buckle down and continue to move yourself further away from your base to appeal to the moderate conservatives that no longer exist as the rest of the GOP moves further to the right? The trending political climate we have seen over the last several years, if not decades, with the proliferation of extremely conservative politicians gaining a foothold in our political economy, can be linked as a direct response to the triangulation strategy deployed by the DNC over the past several decades. Eventually, religious dominionist extremists like Ted Cruz found their way to elected office. And even more recently, Donald J. Trump has found his way into the White House. If the Democrats want to win back working voters, the party will have to be represented by working voters and not corporate interests. We need to take the party away from these people, both those who capitulate to corporate interest and those who refuse to move the Overton window to the left. This has been The New Progressive, empowered by Millennials for Revolution. Follow us on Facebook for more as we continue to break apart the inner workings of the Democrat Party and their corporate revolution that we need to dismantle.